Today I'm going to show you how I knit colorwork inside out. This technique is particularly useful if you're working on a project that has a small circumference, such as a mitten or a sock or even a hat sometimes. If you find that as you're working your colorwork in the circumference and your yarn is being carried inside the project and the project is getting increasingly tighter, or you're starting to have tension issues with your colorwork, then knitting your colorwork inside out could be a good technique for you. Today, I'm going to specifically show you the part of the project for the mitten thumb. This is usually something that I go to an inside out technique for, and I happen to have my second mitten is ready to go with stitches ready to be picked up. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. The method that I'm most comfortable with is using 2 circular needles, but this technique works equally well if you're more comfortable with double point needles or even using a magic loop. So the first thing that we have to do before we pick up the stitches for the thumb is to turn the mitten inside out. And once I have this done, I actually have 15 stitches that I've set aside on a piece of waste yarn when I knit this mitten. So I have to pick these up. So what I would do is to split those stitches. Most mitten projects would also ask you to pick up some additional stitches in here, and this pattern actually asks you to pick up 3 additional stitches. So I'm just going to go ahead and split this. So the 15 plus the 3 is 18, so I'm going to have 9 stitches on each needle. So I just give my waste yarn a little tug so that I can see the stitch loops for each one, and then being a little mindful to try not to split the waste yarn with your needle point is also helpful for removing that. So I'll start to pick up the first 9 for this needle. Now once I have 9 stitches on there, I'll just pull that through so that the cable is on the stitches, and then I'll pick up the remaining stitches and then also the 3 stitches from here at the opening. Once I have all of the stitches picked up onto the needle, I can safely remove the waste yarn and discard. Now, I have to pick up the 3 stitches in here. Since this mitten is a pretty easy colorwork pattern, it's just alternating colors, gray, blue, in a 1-stitch pattern, I know that my next 3 stitches would have to be blue, gray, blue. So we'll start with blue, and there's no proven technique for this that I've found yet anyway. When you're picking up these 3 stitches, I generally will pick up a combination of threads and loops in here to close the gap in the best way possible. So in this case, this stitch here looks pretty good. It looks like I've got enough threads that would close that gap pretty well. So just using the other side of my double pointed needle, I'm going to go ahead. So also I'm working from the inside, so like the right side of the mitten, knitting into the right side of the mitten. This will become a little clearer once I have these stitches on here. So I'm just going to pick that up in there. taking my blue yarn. So there's one stitch picked up. And now I'll just sort of look in here for a second good spot. I like this spot. This stitch will be gray. I'm not too conscious about what hand I'm holding my yarns in at this point, so I'm just going to hook the gray in like this. And then I'm going to go back to a blue stitch to pick up. That looks like a good spot. That. So now I'm going to knit across the rest of the row, and this is where I would switch my colors to the hand. So I generally hold my dominant yarn, in this case the blue, in my right hand, and then my contrast color in my left. You can do this just as easy by alternating the colors, like picking up and dropping, and I'll show you that for a couple of rows as well. But we'll start here. So my first stitch is gray, then a blue stitch, a gray, blue, so that's one row across. Wore the wrong ring. Okay, pull that through. Now, turning your work around. So I guess the difference in this technique is that you're actually always working on your back needle when you're knitting. Normally, you would be working on the front, but since we're working this inside out, we're going to work on the back needle. You will still be working on the right side of your knitting, but from the inside out, okay? So we push this needle into position to get ready. And again, oops. We're just going to work our way across the row from the wrong side of the mitten. And again, the theory behind the inside color work and why it will give you a correct tension for a small circumference is because we're now carrying our threads on the outside. So the yarn has to stretch and reach across from the outside, which is the larger of the circumference, as opposed to being inside your work when you're doing a regular color work knitting, so that the yarns are pulling tighter and tighter and making that circle smaller and smaller. This way, by carrying the yarns outside, it's maintaining this. I'm going to switch this around. And I just wanted to show you. And once you get a couple of rows into this, your yarns get very easy to handle and manage as well. So you see when we go around a corner this way, the threads are now going to the outside instead of pulling tighter to the inside. So get this needle in position. Around my other point. Get ready to knit. And I'll just show you a slightly different technique of, instead of carrying two yarns in two hands, how easy this is just to do with one hand as well. And sometimes if it's a finer yarn, not like this is quite a thick yarn, if it's a finer yarn, I might do it that way as well. Oops, I split my yarn there. Like that. I just find it's a little slower this way. But these are, again, just my techniques. You will continue doing your color work in the technique that you're most comfortable with. So there you have it. So that is inside out color work knitting. Again, just remember you're always working on the back needle, the needle farthest away from you, and moving across on the right side, but on the back needle. And then when you're finished, you can bind off in a regular way. Usually for a mitten thumb, it's knit two together and then put it through a few stitches, pull it tight. I do all of that from the inside. And then when I flip my mitten out, this is what I have. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, you can send me some comments down below. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.